Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day and welcome to another episode of Motorsport History. This is part 2 of my Dakar series. If you haven't watched the first one, I'll put a link in the top right. This time, we're here to discuss the motorcycles of Dakar. It's safe to say that it was toughest for the riders since they were the most exposed to the conditions, had no metal cage around them to keep them safe in case of a crash, and most of the times, the bikes were not as fast as the cars, so the riders had the fear of not being seen by other drivers. Before we get into it, if you like my content, be sure to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate the support. We had quite a lot of interesting competitors in the motorcycle division. Dakar is the reason we got a new type of motorcycle, mostly known as enduros and rally bikes. The name enduro, of course, comes from what these bikes were meant to do: long distance over rough terrain, the greatest test of their endurance. Let's get straight to the bikes. I will present them in order of podiums over the years, telling you about the best competitors. Just like with cars, the first recorded motorcycle Dakar race was in 1979. That year, in first and second place was Yamaha with their XT500. It is known as the off-road brother to the SR500. This was an air-cooled, 4-stroke, 499cc single cylinder with a single overhead cam, claiming 26 horsepower through 5 gears. This bike made a strong name for itself. Like I said, it got first and second in 1979, all 3 podium spots in 1980, and second and third in 1981. In 1981, it was beaten by the lovely BMW R80 GS. The R80 is often known as a great cafe racer. It's a beauty. But Dakar was raced in the GS version, BMW's off-road line of motorcycles. They still use the same symbol today with their R1200 GS. I'm sure you've seen these things on the road. Back to the R80. The 80 stands for its engine size of 797.5, rounded up to 800cc. Motorcycles often have all these specific engine sizes, but that's just how I have to tell you about them to keep all the details. BMW uses a very interesting layout of engines on their motorcycles. They used a flat twin boxer that is still seen on modern motorcycles. Of course, it has evolved through time. It was an air-cooled pushrod 4-stroke making 50 horsepower. Delivering the power was actually a drive shaft, not a chain. The GS was in first place in 81, first in 83, first and second in 84, first again in 85, and third in 87. By this time, the R80 was already outclassed. The opponents became much bigger and tougher. Let me give you an example. In 1986, we saw a new bike rise up, much larger, the Honda NXR 780. Just look at this thing. I can tell you that this was what the legendary XRV, otherwise known as the Africa Twin, was based on. The NXR was amazing, winning in 86, 87, 88, and 89. Through these years, the engine sizes decreased and increased, so by the end, it became the NXR 800V. The numbers, of course, correlate to the size of the engines in cubic centimeters. The twin in the name is because the engine was in a 45-degree V-twin layout. The 4-stroke came with dual overhead cams and 2 spark plugs per cylinder. This made a maximum of 75 horsepower, but it had some more advantages. It was liquid cooled and had 6 gears, which made it better for those endurance races. For any motorcycle fans out there, I gotta tell you, the road version, the Africa Twin, is one of my all-time favorite bikes, even though it was downgraded from the race bike. It came with a 5-speed gearbox and less power. Regardless, you want something that will take you anywhere, anytime? This is the bike for you. It will outlive you without a sweat. It did have a competitor. The one that threw Honda off the podiums was the Yamaha YZE 750. Like the Honda, we have a very famous street version of this bike, the Yamaha XT500, otherwise known as the Ténéré. The engine size was increased to 850 by the time the YZE was replaced by something newer. It was an awesome competitor. It came with a liquid-cooled 4-stroke V-twin with dual overhead cams and 5 valves per cylinder. The bike made 75 horsepower through 5 gears. Let me tell you about the podiums. It got second place in 1988, 89, and 1990. The first 3 podium spots in 1991, first in 1992, and first 3 again in 93. I'm not done yet. It was first again in 95, 96, 97, and 98. That's insane. The only other bike of the time that could step up to Yamaha was actually an Italian brand that most haven't heard about. That is, Cagiva. They made some pretty great bikes over the years, the most famous being a race bike, the Cagiva Mito 125, and a great competitor in the Dakar series, the Cagiva Elephant 900, known for its wonderful Lucky Explorer livery. If anyone was wondering, I did not misspell elephant, that is just how they named it. It came with a 904cc, air-cooled, and we would normally say it was a V-twin, but since it was positioned at 90 degrees, that made it an L-twin, with a single overhead cam, making 68 horsepower through 5 gears. The Elephant managed to beat the YZE in 1990 and 1994. In all the other years, it was right behind it, usually in second or third, so evidently it was actually a competition between those two, from 1990 to 1997. For 7 years, they were pretty much the only bikes on the podium. There was a lot of competition, and this was exciting. There was one exception though. In 1996, a brand new name showed up to the leaderboard, KTM. I'm sure you heard of it. Their LC4 made it to the podiums that year, but that wasn't enough for them. Through the next years, they got better and better. If you ask me, the looks of this thing were not impressive, nor were its specs. It came with a liquid-cooled 609cc 4-stroke, single overhead cam single cylinder, making 55 horsepower through 5 speeds. Nevertheless, the KTM became a new champ, and it's one of the leading bikes in Dakar today. KTM ended up being in first place from 2001 till 2019. They changed a few bikes through the years though. I will mention another competitor, the one that managed to beat KTM just before their killer streak. The one I'm talking about is another BMW, the last one seen on the podiums in Dakar. They raced with the F650RR, a very odd looking bike again. And unlike the name suggests, it was actually a 700cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke, single overhead cam single cylinder, making 75 horsepower through 5 gears. This was one of the last competitors trying to keep KTM away from the podiums. It managed to claim the first place in 1999 and all 3 podium spots in the year 2000. And just so I don't disappoint the Honda fans, guess who the winner of 2020 and 2021 is? The CRF 450 Rally, of course, the bike that finally ended KTM's streak. And with that, I conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in, and come back next time when we take a look at the trucks. Should be something new for all of us. Stay safe out there, and I'll be back with weekly uploads.